Hello, hello, hello. So I did something different there. Those of you who have been attending my lives, you know that I usually just start, but I decided to have like an intro and an outro. So with this software that I'm using, it allows you to do that. Anyway, so that was my first foray into that, and I think it worked well. I mean, let me know in the comments. All right. So um, I am a mentor for a Slack group called Tech Lords. And one of the members asked me, she talked about she's working on her, like she's working on HTML and CSS. And she wanted us, she wants to add JavaScript to the project, but she needed some ideas on how to incorporate JavaScript into her static site project. So I came up with this really simple. So this is really simple. It's for complete beginners, all right? And a simple way, if you have a form on your website incorporating some error messaging if the entry doesn't match the criteria, all right? So it's really simple. We're going to get into this. Hopefully this session is not going to be very long. If you are in the chat, please let me know with the thumbs up. Say hi, Art Developer. I can shout you out, but I'm going to get started. Of course, this is recorded for those who could not make the live. All right, so this is our code right here, okay? So I'm working on jsbin.com because it's a sandbox, and what I like about it is it allows you to spin up something really quick without like committing files and having a project and all of that. So I will make the link to this available in the description after we're done, so that people can, if you need to use the code or you need to, you can look at the code yourself. All right. Okay. So hi Ada, how are you? I see your message. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We have this really simple one-page website, okay? And we have this form. It's really simple. And what we're going to do is we are going to write JavaScript so that if the entry in the full name field is less than 4 characters, we will display this error message. Okay, so there's many ways to do this. All right, there's many ways to display error messaging on websites. This is really simple. I made it simple on purpose because most of you are beginners. All right, but I just want you to know there's many ways. You might have people coming out after this video saying, oh, you can do it this way, oh, you can do it. In coding, there's always 100 ways to do things. All right, so don't let that intimidate you, but I'm starting real simple. All right, so this is the HTML. All right, so we have our paragraphs up here, and then we have this form. Now, I want to point this out. I am using a service called FormKeep, and I'll put this in the description as well. Now, this link is not going to work after this session. Okay, I'm going to delete it, right? But FormKeep is, they have a free tier, and it allows you to have forms in your static site and handle the, the collecting of the data, and it allows you to collect data from your forms without coding the whole thing. I didn't want to code the entire form with the form handling and all of that because it would have been too much, okay? So I wanted to point that out. And so in our example today, FormKeep allows you to receive your submissions in their, like you sign in, and anyone who completes your form, you get their submissions here. And I do believe they have a free level for, it doesn't allow too much, but it allows enough for you at least to test it. Okay, so that's what we are using for this form because I wanted an actual working form. Okay, and then we have just 2 fields. We have the full name and we have the email field. All right, so this is JavaScript, so I'm not going to go through the HTML, but like I said, that will be available, the link in the description. Okay, let's look at the CSS. So this is the CSS for the same project. Okay, all right, so what we are going to do is we are going to work on the JavaScript. Okay, now let's talk through what needs to happen. All right, I have been a developer now for about 3 years, and I always do this. Before, it doesn't matter how small the task is, I always write out the requirements in plain language. Because if I can explain it in plain language, then I can find the code. The code is just a translation. And I think I need new developers to understand that. Coding is translating requirements. Okay. Yes, you learn the syntax. Yes, you learn how to do this, how to do that. But the core of coding is not coding. The core of coding is understanding the requirements so that you can translate them to code. And that will make you a better developer. The better you get at understanding and communicating the requirements of a task or a project, the better you will be as a developer, okay? So we're going to do that first. So what needs to happen, okay? Well, what needs to happen is when somebody types in here, right? When somebody types in this field and then leaves the field, you see when I click in, you have this highlight around the field. And then when I click out, the highlight goes away. So we need to know that when the person, enters something in this field and then clicks out of it, we need to be able to tell the number of characters that they have typed in there. Okay? All right. So we need to, let's just write it. We need to count the number of characters entered after the person leaves the field. Okay, we need to know that. All right. Now, after we know that count, what do we need to check? All right. We need to check that number of characters is at least 4, because that is what will trigger the error if it fails. All right. So we also need to check that number of characters, I'm just going to use a shorthand, number of characters is at least 4, okay? If it is less than 4, display error message, okay? If it is less than 4, display error message. If 4 or more, do nothing. Okay. So even when there are steps in your implementation where you do nothing, write it. Be explicit. Okay. So if it's less than 4 characters, we display the error message. If it is 4 or more characters, we do nothing. All right. And you actually write it. Even if it's a do nothing, write it. Okay. All right. So let's think. Now, so what else? So let's think. Somebody enters less than 4 characters, right? And so we display the error message, but they could still go ahead and click submit, right? Because displaying the error message is just displaying an error. We have not actually prevented them from submitting. So another thing we need to do is if person enters less than 4 characters, prevent form submission. Okay. So those are our requirements. Those are the requirements of the project. And normally as new developers, we tend to be judge, jury, and executioner on our projects, right? What I mean by that is we plan what we're going to do and we do it. We are the only person on the project, which is normal, right? Because you're starting, you're learning. But once you get into a professional role, you will be given requirements, all right? So you will be given what the client wants. Whether you're working for a company or you're freelancing, you will be working for somebody. And that person will give you what they want. And so this practice of defining your requirements, even if it's your personal project, get into the habit of doing this, okay? Even before you code, because it will help you in your interviews later, and it will actually make you a better developer when you're on the job. All right. Okay. So now let's actually start coding. We've done requirements. So let's start coding. All right. So for this tutorial, I am assuming at least a very, very basic knowledge of JavaScript. And what I mean by that is I'm going to go through as I'm coding. I will explain what I'm doing, but I'm not going to go really deep into the syntax, okay? Or else this session will be very long and I want it to be short, okay? So let's start the process now. So we say we want to count the number of characters entered after the person leaves the field. Okay, so the first thing we need is we need the field, right? We need this field. We need to grab it in JavaScript before we can count what is inside it. Okay. All right. So let's do that. So let's go to our HTML. All right. And when we look at our HTML, we see that the full name field is here. The full name field is here. Okay. And this is the input for it here. And we see that we have an ID called full name field. All right. So let's grab that ID and we are going to define a constant and we're going to call it name field. And we are going to use the document get element by ID API call. And we're going to specify what that ID is. All right. Okay. Now I'm going to show you just some simple debugging that you can do while you're coding, all right? So I want to see if I have actually grabbed that element, right? I want to see if I've grabbed what I think I've grabbed, all right? So I'm going to console.log the name field variable and see what I get back, all right? So let me close HTML, let me open console, and I'm going to run, because in this, in JS bin, if you don't like, you can click this and it says auto run JS, but I don't like to do that. Like I like to control when I'm running my JavaScript in the project. So I'm going to click run with JS and I should have, oh, it's not going to work. Okay, let me alert it. It's not going to work because there isn't something being executed for the console log to work. So let me see if alert will work. Aha, okay. Oh, it's not giving me the full. Anyway, HTML input elements. That's good enough, okay? So it's telling me, okay, I've grabbed an HTML input element and it says input element. So that tells me, okay, I've probably grabbed the right thing. Okay. All right. So we grab the name field. Okay. Let's look at our requirement. We count the number of characters. Okay. We check. All right. Now it says if it is less than 4, display error message. All right. So if we go back to our HTML, we see, let me close console. We see that our error message is down here. Okay. It's a P tag, right? You see it right here. This is our error message. Okay. So if we're going to display that error message using JavaScript, we need to grab it. All right. So let's grab that as well. Okay. So const name field error is equal to, and I'm just going to copy this because it's the same thing, because that also has an ID, but we're going to change the ID to the ID of the error message. All right. So we've grabbed that as well. So let's look. In our third requirement, it says if person entered less than 4 characters, prevent form submission, or in other words, let me write this a better way, prevent person from clicking submit. Okay, that's more explicit. All right. And the way you do that with a button is you add a disabled property or a disabled attribute to the button, and I'll show you what that does in the HTML. And so over here, if I type disabled, okay, I just add disabled. What happens is the button gets disabled. I can't click it. Okay, I can't click the button. All right. So that's what we're going to do in the JavaScript. All right, not here. Okay, I just wanted to show you what it means. All right. Okay, so in order to do that to the button, we have to grab the button. All right. So const, we're going to say submit button, and that's equal to, I'm just going to grab the code. It's a lot of copy and pasting that we do. And I'm going to grab the ID of the button and I'm going to put that in there. Okay, good. So now we have our elements that we're going to be acting upon in our JavaScript, okay? And you see how our requirements are guiding the process, all right? Okay, so let's start coding. So we say we want to count the number of characters entered after the person leaves the field, all right? So there's two parts there. We are counting the number of characters. Okay, we are counting. So let's do that first. Okay, let me show you what this is going to go away, but let's do that first. Okay, so const count characters. Okay, I'm defining a function. Okay, and I'm using arrow notation. Okay, so const count characters. Okay, no, sorry, my bad. Okay. Okay, although I believe I heard that it's only when you need access to the this object that you use arrow. Let's use the regular, let's use the not old, but let's use the function keyword to define this function. Okay, I don't want to use arrow notation because down the line I might teach on that and I don't want to confuse anybody. So let's use this. Arrow works, but let's use this way. So function count characters, okay, and we open and we are going to say we want to count the characters in the name field. All right, so we need to grab, so we have our name field. So we say name field value. Okay, name field value. Let's do that first. So function count characters, we are going to console.log. Console.log just means print it to the console. So we're going to console.log the value. I'm thinking. Okay. I didn't do this beforehand. If you know one thing about me, I don't code. I don't practice before I teach. I just come in cold because I think it's important that you see me work things out. Okay, that's part of coding. So I don't practice before, I wrote this beforehand, but I didn't do the JavaScript. I'm trying to think how to teach this part in a way that you understand. Okay, let me just go for it. I think you understand. All right, so with this requirement here, like we said, we want to count the characters that have been entered after the person leaves. Okay, so how are we going to know that the person has left? All right, that's the thing. How are we going to know that the person has, after clicking into the field, they've come out of it, or after tabbing into the field, they've tabbed out of it? All right, so we're going to need what is called an event listener. All right, and an event listener in JavaScript is exactly what it says. It listens for events. And in a browser, there are so many different events. Clicking is an event. Typing, like pressing a key down, is an event. Releasing a key up, is an event. All right. When it comes to forms or elements on the page, we have what is called focus out. Right. So focus means an element is focused on. So you see, when I click on the field, you see that pink border. That indicates that this field is being focused on. And when I click out, then it's focused off. I need to get the syntax, but so that is the event that we're going to listen for. We need to listen for it because when it happens, then we do what we need to do, which is count the characters. All right. So that's the purpose of event listeners. Event listeners allow you to listen for events, listen for actions on your website, so that when the action happens, you can do something with it. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to add event listeners are added to elements. Okay. Or you can add an event listener to your entire body. Hello, Victor. How are you? You can add an event listener to your entire project. That's typically bad practice. You want to narrow in where you're listening to as much as possible. So in this case, we are listening to the name field. All right. So we are going to say name field. How are you? Emeka, how are you? So we are listening to the name field. We're going to say add event listener. Okay, that's how you do it. So whatever the element is that you're listening from, which is our name field, we add event listener, okay? Then we open we open the bracket. Then you have to tell the event listener what you're listening for, okay? I've forgotten the name of it, so let me check. Event listener focus out. Yes, okay, I'm correct. Okay, focus out event. Okay, that's what we need. Okay, so you have to tell the event listener what you are listening for. So in this case, we are listening for the focus out event. Okay, comma, and then we now need to capture the event itself. Okay, so you say event. Okay, so we are listening for focus out. Then we need to capture the event, and you'll see why. All right. And then we open our function. Okay, so this is the event listener function. All right. Okay, so we need to capture the event. Why? Because the event has a target. Okay, the event has a target, and that target for us will be the content of this name field, because remember, we are counting the characters. Okay, let's code it, you'll see. All right, so let's console log. Let's console, it will work now. Console log will work now because we're going to be doing something. So let's console log the event target. Okay, just to see what we get. All right. All right, so we are going to close HTML. We're going to open our console because this is where the output will happen. And I'm going to click in here and I'm going to type F. Okay, I typed F, all right? But I'm still in the field. Nothing has happened. Why? I'm still there. The field is still focused on. I haven't left it, okay? The event we're listening for is focus out, okay? So when I click out, why am I, oh, my bad. I know what is happening. Sorry. I need to run with JavaScript. That's why. I'm not in this sandbox. If you don't specify that you want to run it with JavaScript, it will render your HTML and CSS, but it will leave your JavaScript alone. That's what was happening before. Okay, so let me run with JavaScript. Okay, it told me, so it did, it delayed. Let's start again. Okay, so I'm running with JavaScript. Why is this happening? Oh, it's console logging. Okay, yes. So it's event target. So when I run with JavaScript, you see it's console logging HTML input element. Good. So we have tested the hookup of our event listener, and our event listener is working. Okay. Now let's console log event target value. Okay, because we want the value of the target, what is in there. Okay, so let's do that. So I run with JS. Okay, I run with JS. I click in to my field, nothing. I press FFF, nothing. I click out. That's our value right there. You see how we console log? Okay, because I triggered the focus out event and I have a listener on that field. So the listener is listening, and once focus out happens, it executes whatever is inside the function. And what is inside the function is console log the value of the event target. And the value was what I entered, which is FFF. Okay, so this tells us that we are hooked up. Okay, we are hooked up, right? Okay, but what were our requirements? Our requirement was we want to count the number of characters. Okay, we don't just want to know what they are. We want to count the number. All right, so the way we count is we add the property length. Okay, so event target. Now we have the target, which is the field. The value of the field is what was entered into the field. And then the length of the value is the number of characters. Okay, so let's see how. Let me clear this. Okay, and let's rerun it. Let me clear the console and we run with JavaScript. Okay, now I'm going to type my name. Okay, and I click out. What happened? Did I not? It's doing the old one. Hold on. This is weird. Okay, did it not save? Coding. Okay, console log event target value length. Yes. Okay. All right. Did you not save? Okay, let's see what's going on. Okay. Aha, okay. It hadn't updated. All right. So you see what happened. So I typed AAA, and when I clicked out, then this function fired because I fulfilled the event listener. Okay, focus out. So it fired and it's giving me the length of what I entered, which is 3. So that tells me 3 characters. Okay, so we have actually fulfilled the first requirement. All right. Okay, so let me close the console and let's keep coding. All right, so let's actually make it. Don't worry about these error messages, those little squiggly lines. Okay, so let's now, because we've gotten our length, so now we need to capture it. Okay, we're not going to console log it. Okay, we're going to use that value. All right, so how do we do that? We're going to say number. Oh, what is going on? Okay, all right, stop it. Oh, something is happening. 1 second. Okay, all right, I refreshed it. Okay, what is going on? Okay, all right, I had so many spaces. Okay, so number of characters, and it's going to be a const. Sorry, I'm used to coding in Ruby. In Ruby, you don't have to, you can just declare the variable name. You don't have to const or let or var. So that's why I keep doing that. So we're going to say number of characters is equal to, and we know it's equal to this. Okay, we know it's equal to, we've tested it. So the number, once the focus out happens, once the focus out event happens, we are going to count the number of characters and we're going to save it in a variable. Okay, so that's what we've done. Num characters, number of characters equals the, now we need to go, so we have fulfilled. It's like we can say check. Okay, check. Check means done. Okay, let me use the word done. Okay, our requirements guide what we are doing. Okay, and I'm not holding it in my head. That's another benefit of writing out the requirements, is you don't have to hold it up here. You've written it out, so you just refer back to your notes. Okay, so we have done this part. Okay, so now we move to the second requirement, which is check that the number of characters is at least 4. Okay, check that the number of characters is at least 4. Okay, if it is less than 4, display error message. If 4 or more, do nothing. Okay, so we now need to use our if block. Okay, conditionals in JavaScript. So we now need to use our if. All right, and what are we checking? If number of characters is less than 4, that is the condition that will trigger the error. Okay, if number of characters is less than 4, okay, if it is less than 4, then we're going to do something. Okay, we're going to display error message. Okay, now we have another thing to do. If person entered less than 4 characters, prevent person from clicking submit. So the other thing that needs to happen in here, if this condition is met, if this if condition is met, the second thing that needs to happen here is we need to disable submit button. Okay? Okay. Wonderful. Let's think about it some more. All right? Let's assume somebody entered less than 4 characters. Okay? Like they entered Ben. Because we say full name, so we're expecting first name and last name. So let's say they just entered Ben. So the error message came up and they are prevented from submitting. What if they now go back? What if they go back and correct themselves and put in their full name? We don't have anything checking for that. Okay? We don't have anything. If we leave it just like this, yes, if somebody enters less than 4, it will work. But if they go back and enter re-enter it and is more than 4, we've already disabled the submit button. They won't even be able to submit. Okay, so you need to account for the opposite happening. Okay, and how do we do that? We say else. Okay, if number of characters is less than 4, but if it is 4 or more, that is the else. Else has captured the opposite happening, which is 4 or more characters. The first condition, the if, has captured less than 4. The else captures more than 4, 4 or more. That's captured it. Okay, so else, what do we want to do? We want to remove the error message. Doesn't make sense to still show an error message when they have fulfilled the requirements, when they have entered at least 4 characters. So we want to remove the error message and then, we want to enable the submit button. Allow them to click it. All right. So you see how I'm using comments. I'm using pseudocode. Okay. Because when you have the understanding, you can code it. You have Google. You can search. You can look at references. You can look at resources. The key thing is understanding first what needs to happen. Okay. All right. So we say here, display error message. Well, we have our error message here. We captured it in the name field error. But what is going on? Right here in our HTML is already displayed. Right? So how are we going to display something that's already displayed? So we need to hide it. Okay? We need to hide it by default. So let's open our HTML and let's open our CSS. Because we need to hide our error message by default. Default means when you first land on the page, what is the state of the message? The state is that it is hidden. All right? So that our JavaScript can now unhide it. Okay? So how do we do that? Well, we have our message here. Okay? This is our message. All right? So in the CSS, I'm going to define a new class and I'm going to call it hidden. That went away because I'm still typing. So I'm going to call this the hidden class, and I'm going to define the visibility property, and I'm going to say hidden. Okay. So this is the hidden class, and whatever it is applied to, it will set the visibility of that element to hidden. All right. So I'm going to take that class and I'm going to add it to the error message. See what happened? It went away. It's hidden. Okay, that's what we want because the error hasn't been triggered. So we don't want it to show. Okay, so let's go back to JavaScript. All right. So what are we going to do? We want to display the error message if number of characters is less than 4. All right. So how do we do that? Well, in JavaScript, you can grab the class list, the number of classes that are on an element, and you can choose to either add classes or remove them. There's a third one called toggle. We're not going to look into that today. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to grab the error message, and using JavaScript, we are going to remove that hidden class, because if we remove the hidden class, it will show. All right. Okay, so our error message is called name field error. Okay, so on that element, we're going to call class list. Okay, so we're dealing now with the list of classes on the element. Then we're going to say remove, and then we're going to tell it which class to remove, which is the hidden class. Okay, the hidden class. We're going to do that. All right. So that's the first part. We'll demo it. Just wait. That's the first part. Now the second part is the submit button. We need to disable that. Okay. And so how we disable that is we grab it. We already have the variable. We've already grabbed it here in the submit button const. Okay. So we grab that and in JavaScript for the disabled property, you can, I'll show you. So we say dot disabled and then we set it equal to true. Yes. So that statement, whatever Every property has almost like a hidden disabled attribute, and JavaScript grabs that. And so if we say equal to true, we set it equal to true, it will apply that disabled nature onto the element. In this case, our button. Okay? In this case, our button. All right. So let's run with JavaScript. Okay? Just to make sure it's connected. So let's see what this looks like. Okay? So I'm going to type Ben. Okay? But I'm still in the field. I haven't triggered focus out. So when I click out, I get my error message. Yay! And my button is disabled. Okay? I'm clicking it. It's not clicking. Okay? It's not clicking because I have failed this validation. All right? So let me show you what I meant earlier. If I go back here and I say Ben Wilson, okay? So I've typed now my full name. It's more than 4 characters. When I click out, nothing happens. I'm still seeing the error message and the button is still disabled because we haven't accounted for that in our code. Okay? So this is what is called user experience. It's very particular for front-end developers because the front end is what faces the user. Okay? Back-end developers, not so much. But the truth of the matter is a lot of backenders now are also learning front end because the two are kind of becoming more intertwined, right? Okay. So, what will happen if you submit an error message? Must it necessarily... This is an example, Confor. I'm just giving an example. There's nothing that I'm doing that is a rule. Like, there's no rule that every field must have this particular error message. This is just an example. You can make it whatever you want. Okay? The point of this is more showing how to use JavaScript to implement this. Okay? But what I'm implementing itself is not a rule. It doesn't mean that it has to be like this. Okay? All right. So as you can see, I've corrected myself, but it's still not allowing me to move on, right? Because we haven't handled that in our JavaScript. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay? So we want to remove the error message. So removing the error message means hiding it again. Okay? So let's copy the code we used to display it and we're going to reverse it. Okay? Removing the error message means to hide it again. And we hide it again by re-adding the hidden class. Okay? So instead of remove, we are going to add. All right? So we add back the hidden class and that will hide it. Okay? We add back the hidden class and that will hide it. Okay? And then, same thing is the opposite for the disabling of the button. Right? We are going to set disabled to false. All right? We set it to false. So that has now reversed what we did when the number of characters is 4 or more, which is captured by the else. The else just means opposite of what we have here. All right? So let's run with JavaScript and let's see what happens. So I type Ben, I click out, I get my error message, submit button is disabled. I go now and I type my last name Wilson. I click out. Ooh, what is happening? What is happening? Okay, maybe something hasn't connected. 1 second. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so Ben. Oh, sorry. Run with JavaScript. Okay, run. Okay, so Ben. Okay, we click out. Okay, we see what we expect. Then I come in. I say Wilson. I click out. There we go. It wasn't connected. So you see, as I type my full name and I click out, my focus out, it has reversed. The error message is gone and my button is enabled. Okay? I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Okay? Let's submit the button and see what happens. Let me just put my email here. hello@arit.dev. Okay. And I say submit. Okay. And this is what the form keep service does. It's, it's allowed, it has handled the form submission for me. And if I come to my form keep console and I refresh, you see, this is our submission here. You see, Ben Wilson and email. Okay, so that's what I meant at the beginning. Like, I'm just using a free form handling service so that I wanted to actually show you form submission from the project, but I didn't want to code it. You can code what just happened, but it will be a lot. Okay, so I didn't want to do that. Okay, so let's refresh and get our form back. All right, so let's look at our requirements. Let's make sure we met everything. So count the number of characters. We've done that. Check that number is at least 4. If it is less than 4, display error message. We've done that. If it is 4 or more, do nothing. That is initially. So there's actually another requirement we missed. Okay, if person entered less than 4 characters before, then corrects themselves, hide error and enable submit button. So that was actually a part of our requirement that we didn't specify, okay? But we've done that, all right? We've done that. And then if the person entered less than 4, prevent person from clicking submit. Okay, so we've done that, all right? So if we go through it again, okay, I entered Ben. Sorry. It's not connected. Okay, run with JS. Okay, so I've entered Ben and I click out. It has given me my error. Even if I go ahead and, enter my email, I can't go anywhere. Because I've not met the requirement for full name. Okay, so I go back to full name. Okay, and I say Ben Winter and I click out. The error is gone. My button is ready. I can submit the form. It submits correctly, and we can check here that we got the submission. You see, we have 2. Okay, so that's it. That is it. Just a very simple example of how to add JavaScript to a project you're working on. I chose this form validation. That's really what this is form entry validation using JavaScript. There are many ways to do it. I wanted to do this as simply as I could for the benefit of our new developers, all right? Chukudi, is there a max amount of characters you can enter? You can do that, okay? So let's do that. We have some time. Let's do that. So if number of characters is less than 4, okay, then if you wanted to have an upper limit, well, the first thing you have to do is in your HTML, we need the error message, okay? So we need this error message. We need the error message for too many characters, all right? So name field error, let's call this too small, okay? Because you can't have the same ID, all right? So then we call this too much, okay? And then we have to change our error message name. Let's say name cannot be more than, and let's say 12 characters, okay? All right, so we've added that error message as well, okay? So let's go to our JavaScript now. And so we need to account for that. So we first check if numbers is less than 4, we trigger, okay, we need to grab, okay, so we're not done yet. We need to change this. So our name field error ID has changed. So we need to update. Yes, document get element by class. That's fine, Ada, that's fine. I tend to favor IDs. I think they are less error prone because the get element by class or the query selector, sometimes if you have more than one, it will grab it as an array. So the thing I like about ID is because you can only have one ID per page, you can grab the specific, there's more specificity, I think, to get element by ID, but you can use the other queries. That's fine. Okay. So name field error, we need to rename this name field error too small. Okay. So we have that. And then we need to grab the second error message, which is name field error too much. And we change this also to too much. Okay. So we have the second error message. Now we come down to our function, our event listener. Let's close HTML. So now we come down to our event listener. So now we need to account for that. So we need to change this here. This now has to be too small. Okay. And this has to be too small. Okay. Now we need to account for that, the case of it being more than, I think we said 12, right? Let's see. We said it cannot be more than 12. Okay. So we need to account for that. So over here, instead of the else, we have to add another if. So we say else if. I think there's no E in JavaScript. Let me just make sure. Else if. Let me just see how it's written. Okay, if. The else statement, the else if. Okay, it's actually else if. It's different in Ruby. All right, so else if, okay? So we have our else if, okay? And then we have our else. So in this case, because we have an else if, so less than 4, something happens. More than 12, something happens. So now the else, the final else, takes care of everything that happens in between those two boundaries. 4 or more, 12 or less. The else covers that because we've already taken care of less than 4 and we've taken care of more than 12. Okay? So understand your conditionals. Sometimes constructing conditionals can be confusing. You need to kind of understand what the boundaries of the conditionals are. Okay? So else if num characters is more than 12. So that's the second boundary that we're setting up in our JavaScript, more than 12. So if num characters is more than 12, then we do what we did for less than 4, is just we are acting on a different error message. So in this case, we are acting on the name field error too much. Okay? We are acting on the name field error too much, but we are still disabling the button, the submit button. So the else has now covered it, but see, the else has only covered the too small. We have to also rehide the too much error. So we copy this and we paste it under here and we say add. Okay? All right. So we have removed in that else block, we have removed all the errors. Okay. All right. So let's see. I'm going to run with JS. Actually, let me refresh. I don't trust this JS bin. Okay. And I'm going to say run with JS. So let's test it. Let's see. So if I say, let's test the too little. So if I say Ben and I click out, okay, I get my error and it's disabled. Okay. Now, if I say Winter Wilson, which I know now this is more than 12, all right? So if I click out, you see? So we are getting our, our right error message, but the old one is still there. The old one is still there. So we are going to have to remove it. Okay, I'm going to say something after this, but we're running out of time. So we're going to have to remove this. So over here, it's funny. We have to make sure that only one error message is showing at a time. So in this case up here, we have to hide, if the too much error is showing, we have to hide it. And in this case here, if the too small error is showing, we have to hide it. Okay. whoever asked this question, okay, we have to hide it, okay? Because you don't want a situation where conflicting error messages are showing. That is a bad user experience, all right? So let me run with JS, okay? Run with it. Okay, so let's go through again, all right? So I did a short name. I clicked out. I have my error. Then I went in and typed a too long name. Okay, I click out. Aha! So now I have the right error. The old one has gone away and my button is still disabled. Okay, so if I now go back and I put a good enough name, I think under 12 characters, both my error messages are gone and I can submit. I'm not going to submit, but I can submit. Okay, so that was answering the question of maximum. Okay, now I will say this before I end. You see how with this small functionality, look at all this code that we have. Okay, so the reality is, if I were supervising this work, if I were critiquing this code, okay, if I were critiquing this code, I would say that instead of hard coding the error message in the HTML like this, why not handle even the error message in the JavaScript? And so what that means is you only have one place for error message, just one. But then whatever the error message is, you insert it using JavaScript. Maybe that will be the next session. We can do that for the next session. Okay. So you insert the error message. So in the JavaScript here, you would define your error message in the JavaScript, and then wherever it needs to be inserted or removed, you insert it or remove it in the function. So that way, if you had 5 error message types, you won't end up having to hard code all the error messages in the HTML. So that's what you call code optimization, okay? So your code might be working, our code is working, but is there a better way to do it, okay? So, but we're not going to do that this time. So any last questions? Any last questions before I end? I'm looking at the chat. Any final questions? Like I said, I'm going to put the link for this in the description. The form thing is not going to work because I'm going to disable it. You feel free to set up your own form handling service. FormKeep is great. There's a free tier for it, so you can use it. I will have the link to this code in the description, so you should be able to at least copy. I don't think you will be able to edit it in here, but you can copy it. But yes, okay. It doesn't look like there are any questions, so I'm gonna go. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. And for those who couldn't make it, of course, it's recorded so they can watch it at another time. All right. So I'll see you in Slack. Bye-bye.